Now to our guest who's been waiting patiently on the line, Caleb Maupin. Welcome to the show. Caleb Maupin is the political analyst and journalist, founder of Center for Political Innovation, author of Trotsky and the Neoconservatives, The Whole Story, and another one of his many books is Who Are the Houthis and What Are They Fighting For? Welcome to the show, Caleb.
Sure, glad to be here.
So we just heard from Paul Lorenzo that Assata Shakur has passed. I don't know if you have any comments on that or thoughts.
Oh, well, Assata Shakur was a leader of the Black Liberation Army. She lived in Cuba after, escaping from prison, and she was certainly a symbol of the Black Liberation Movement and the fact that the Black Liberation Movement of the 1970s and 60s and even back to the 50s was always aligned with the anti-imperialist countries. It was the Soviet Union that took the picture of Emmett Till and, the mutilated body of this young man who'd been killed and sent it all over the world showing the realities of Jim Crow segregation. It was Cuba that welcomed Assata Shakur, as well as Robert F. Williams and other Black liberation fighters who had to flee, and that there was an alliance between countries like the Soviet Union and China and North Korea and the Black liberation movement in America. And Assata Shakur, an icon of the Black freedom struggle, whose works are widely studied. Her autobiography and her writings are widely studied right up to today, and Black studies and on campuses and such. And, she spent her life in Cuba because they supported her when they felt that she was unfairly targeted by the American government. And I think that link between the anti-colonial movements around the world and the Black freedom struggle can't be forgotten, especially when we're living in an age when there's an effort to really kind of confuse people about these kind of things.
Right. Thank you for that. So I just wanted to go to what happened this morning. I've just spoke to Paul Lorenzo, who's outside the UN with tens of thousands of pro-Palestinian protesters calling for the arrest of Benjamin Netanyahu, who spoke at the UNGA. Did you get a chance to listen to the speech, and what did you make of it?
Well, it was kind of amazing to see 90% of the room get up and walk out, and to see that Benjamin Netanyahu was visibly shaken. It was certainly a dramatic moment. I mean, we've seen moves against Israel at the UN General Assembly before, but it's never been this dramatic. And it kind of made me a bit embarrassed to be an American because to see that whole room just emptying out in opposition to what Israel's doing, but to know that Israel wouldn't be able to do it if there wasn't one country that had Israel's back, and that's America, right? And it's America and Israel against the world. I mean, that's what I got from the scene there in the General Assembly Hall. And that's a moment where we should be looking in the mirror and saying, wait a second, if the entire planet is basically lining up and opposing what Israel's doing, even, countries that recognize and have diplomatic relations with them say they have a right to exist, et cetera. But the whole world is basically saying what Israel has been doing since the October 7th events has so far crossed the line and entered, genocide, war crimes against humanity territory. If the whole world is saying that, but America just continues to rubber stamp and write checks to Israel, we should be looking ourselves in the mirror and saying, what's going on here?
Yeah. And what did you take from the things he was saying? He tried to equate what the justification for doing what he was doing in Gaza with 9/11. I mean, what did you make of that? And if it had happened on American soil, if October the 7th had happened on American soil, but embellishing the numbers of death and hostages taken, what did you make about that comparison?
I mean, look, Netanyahu, he does his UN speeches. There was a couple of years ago, he was there. He had a big picture of a bomb, and it was like about Iran is about to get a nuclear bomb. And he had like a bomb graph. And, he's quite a good showman. I'll give him that, right? I mean, he's very, very good at what he does. He can give a good speech. He can put on a good show, but at the end of the day, it just doesn't match reality. And, after 9/11, the United States invaded Afghanistan, and Osama bin Laden was not in Afghanistan, but the USA occupied Afghanistan for 20 years. And then the USA invaded Iraq, which had nothing to do with 9/11. So it's like he's saying, okay, if this was like 9/11, this would happen. Well, we saw the U.S. response to the 9/11 attacks and how, not serving of the American people and their safety it was. Ever since 9/11, the U.S. government has basically been acting as al-Qaeda's air force. We toppled the government of Saddam Hussein, a secular government that had been fighting al-Qaeda for years. We toppled Gaddafi's government in Libya. Gaddafi was so opposed to al-Qaeda, he offered to torture people. He couldn't stand them. He was a secular leader, and the USA overthrew Gaddafi, and ISIS set up shop in Libya. And we've been waging war against the Syrian government. And now somebody who danced on 9/11, al-Jilani, a literal terrorist who was wanted by the U.S. federal government for being involved in the networks that carried out 9/11, is the leader of Syria thanks to U.S. foreign policy. So I look at this and he's saying, oh, well, what Israel is doing is justified because America responded to 9/11. Well, the American response to 9/11 didn't stop terrorism around the world. So even that is just completely misguided. He's appealing to a lot of confusion. He puts on a good show, though. I'll give him that. I mean, he's prime minister of Israel, and he's good at what he does. He's got a tough job to sell genocide to the world and, tell the world he's doing the right thing. I don't envy his position and the difficult tasks he's trying to do.
Right. I wonder if we could switch now to more domestic concerns. So President Trump just signed a memorandum directing an all-government effort to investigate what he calls left-wing terrorism. How unprecedented is this kind of federal mobilization against a specific political category in U.S. history?
Well, first of all, it's weird from a legal perspective because what no one seems to be acknowledging is there is no legal definition, designation of domestic terrorists, right? There is the foreign terrorist designation. There's the Anti-Terrorism and Effective Death Penalty Act that was signed by Bill Clinton, gives the U.S. State Department the authority to designate foreign organizations as FTOs, designated foreign terrorist organizations, and then they're subject to a huge amount of sanctions, and it's a very serious crime if you're an American and you give them money or you associate with them in any way. But there is no such designation for domestic organizations. Now, in Britain, they have laws about that, and other countries have such a designation. We don't. So when Trump came out and said, I'm declaring Antifa to be a domestic terrorist group, that means nothing. That just means he's going to call them that. It has no legal implication. And unless we, write a new law where we can, designate groups as domestic terrorist groups, there's no legal implication. If you do a terrorist act, if you engage in an act of terrorism, if you conspire or plot to commit an act of terrorism, that's a crime. But there's no official designation of a domestic terrorist group. And that's what makes Trump's, words kind of hollow. I mean, it almost seems performative.
Right. But of course, we do know because of COINTELPRO, because of what the FBI, we do know that both the CIA and the FBI have gone after, in quotes, left-wing groups in the past, right?
Well, sure. I mean, and, the operation that targeted Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., the infamous COINTELPRO program of the FBI, it was the counterintelligence program because the FBI considered left-wing activism, the civil rights movement and the anti-war movement, to be intelligence operations because they thought they would benefit the Soviet Union and benefit communist countries. And so in the name of fighting intelligence, they fought against left-wing activists because the Soviet Union and China and Vietnam and other such countries were U.S. foreign policy opponents, and they were left-wing Marxist-Leninist governments. And so it was assumed that left-wing activists were by default doing intelligence work and assets of the intelligence agencies of foreign governments. And the FBI targeted them very viciously and violated the civil rights of thousands and thousands of people. And the Church Committee had hearings about what the FBI did in the late 70s. It was revealed. I mean, a huge amount of information came out about all kinds of ways in which left-wing activists had their reputations destroyed, in which people were framed up for crimes they didn't commit, in which entrapment operations went on. I would recommend reading the book by Jim Vanderwall and Ward Churchill called The COINTELPRO Papers. where these two scholars went through all that was revealed by the church committee. And you will read in there all kinds of huge, shocking violations of human rights. The FBI had a guy named Tony, that was known as Tony the Traveler. And he went from college campus to college campus in the 1960s, showing up, claiming to be a leader of Students for a Democratic Society, and instructing students on how to make bombs and telling them how to make it, helping them find the explosives, and then they would get arrested for setting off explosives. And hundreds of people were entrapped just by this one FBI informant who went by the name of Tony the Traveler. And this went on in the 1960s and early 70s. And there's many cases like this. And, you know, we know about the infamous letter that was sent to Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. urging him to commit suicide, how they released a photograph to Time magazine, or I think it was Newsweek. They released a photograph to Newsweek trying to imply that Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was gay. They were particularly nasty in those years, and left-wing, people that were left-wing were perceived as agents of a foreign power, and they were the target, no question about it.
Yeah. So we haven't got much time left, unfortunately, but this memorandum comes just hours after a grand jury indicted former FBI Director James Comey, who Trump has long sought to punish. How do you interpret the timing of these two events?
Well, I think that Donald Trump is very much at odds with a lot of the so-called deep state, a lot of the intelligence apparatus. The FBI is one of the intelligence agencies. Part of their activities as a law enforcement agency is enforcing U.S. foreign policy and going after individuals and entities considered to be assets of foreign intelligence. And they're considered an intelligence agency. We think of them as law enforcement, but they're actually considered to be an intelligence agency. And Donald Trump has tried to make peace with Russia, and he had his Alaska summit. And prior to that Alaska summit, it was revealed, all kinds of documents were revealed showing that Russiagate, the so-called claim that somehow Russia meddled in the U.S. elections in order to help Trump, that was a hoax, that it wasn't real. And that they did announce at that point that Pam Bondi was forming a section of the U.S. Department of Justice that was going to go after those who engaged in dishonesty and fraud in order to push the Russiagate narrative. It appears James Comey is the first of what will be many prosecutions of individuals who lied to the American people to push this Russiagate hoax. It had huge implications. This war in Ukraine wouldn't be going on right now if it wasn't for the Russiagate hoax. If Trump had been able to come into office and improve relations with Russia as he wanted to do, it wouldn't have happened. But he entered office on the defensive, being accused of being a Russian asset. And then after that, we know that Hunter Biden's laptop scandal was suppressed. Mainstream media suppressed the Hunter Biden laptop scandal because the FBI went around to mainstream media and said, oh, this is a Russian propaganda story to hurt Joe Biden, so don't report on it. Well, we now know it wasn't a Russian propaganda story. It was true. The Hunter Biden laptop and all that corruption was real. And that was just the FBI meddling in our elections. And so Biden won the election. And now we have this ugly war in Ukraine that has taken hundreds of thousands of lives. If they had not lied about Russiagate, hundreds of thousands of people would be alive. Hundreds of thousands of people are dead now because of a lie that influenced our political system in the United States, that impacted international relations and deepened tensions and made it difficult for Russia and the USA to get along. And people are dead. And James Comey, he lied to Congress about this. And it appears that he also obstructed justice and prevented investigations that were going on, and that this looks like a step in, Trump kind of pushing back against entities in the intelligence-linked apparatus who worked against him, and he's, fighting back against them. And I hope that this is going to enable him to improve relations with Russia. That I think that the feeling that Tulsi Gabbard and Pam Bondi and others have is they won't be able to really move ahead with ending the war in Ukraine unless there is some effort to restrict and restrain the intelligence apparatus that is thoroughly committed to hostility to Russia. And this is an attempt to push back the power of the so-called deep state and create more space for Trump to improve relations with Russia by targeting the people that lied and broke the law in order to push the Russiagate hoax.
Right. Caleb, we're going to have to wrap it up there, I'm afraid, for today. But we will have you on the show again, I'm no doubt. Thank you very much for joining us this afternoon.